Hello everyone. We're going to be reviewing this DHCP lab setup. If you look at the diagram carefully, this is a lab to configure DHCP, and also we're going to be having what we call the DHCP client and also the DHCP server. That way, we have a main router doing the DHCP while we have another router acting as a DHCP client. To begin this configuration, I'm going to pull out a desktop or PC to use as my console, just as standard practice. So I'm going to select my RS-232 and go to my console ports and connect it to my console. So I'm going to be doing my configuration. So let's read the questions easily for ease of understanding. The first question says configure the following DHCP pool on router 2. We have 3 DHCP pools. If you look carefully, we have pool 1, pool 2, and pool 3. Pool 1 was specified, we're told to reserve IP address 1 to 10. We also have pool 2, reserve 1 to 10, and pool 3, reserve just .1. So I'm going to proceed and start configuring DHCP on these routers. As usual, standard practice, I'll go to my desktop and click on terminal. Router 2, as specified by the question, I'm going to proceed and configure DHCP. IP DHCP pool. So define the domain name. I have a common domain name here called madessencellc.com. That's our domain name. And the last puzzle here says we should reserve IP address 1 to 10. Define IP host 1 to 10. Define IP host 1 to 10. So I'm going to reserve it. Exit IP DHCP. So we just reserved from 1 to 10. That's what we just did using the IP DHCP command for the start IP and the high IP, which is the end IP, which is 1 to 10. That's what we just did for router 2. Still on router 2, I'm going to configure the another pool IP. So I'm going to use pool B because of our question. So we should let's see. We did not configure our default gateway, which is our default router. So I'm going to go back and configure the default router. So this time I have to go back into my existing DHCP pool, IP DHCP pool. Don't forget we created A. Now I'm back to pool A. I'm going to configure my default router. That was a completely forgot that on my part. So default router. Now the diagram, our default router is, let me get my pen to pen. Okay, let's use this. The default router is going to be the gateway for this network, which is .1. See, that's going to be our default router 2.1. So .1. So let's configure the default router. 192.168.2.1. Now we can go back and create our pool 2, IP DHCP pool B for the next pool. This time we're just going to repeat everything we have done before. But this time it's going to be a different network as seen in the question. DNS server. Domain name. Default router. The default router here as specified for these diagrams. Let's see again. They said router 2. I kind of put a label to explain to you what we are configuring. So the default router for is the default gateway for router 2. Where is router 2? That is 2.1. Oh, I think we made a mistake earlier. The default gateway for this ought to be router 1. So we are supposed to come here and configure 192.168.1.1 on pool A. But don't worry, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. Default router still on router 2. It's going to be the gateway for router 2. Don't forget, this is a different kind of DHCP that we are configuring. So 192.168.2.1. Okay. IP DHCP excluded address. Exit. IP DHCP excluded address. Tell 1 to 10 also. So let's save out 1 to 10. 192.168.2.1. 192.168.2.10. We have saved that 1 to 10. All right. Okay. I'm going to quickly go to pool 3. IP DHCP pool C, which is the third pool I'm creating. For this pool, I'm just going to go reserve. Okay. I'm going to define the network address. Because it's a reserve pool, I could just go in and define the network address and I'll leave it so. So network. class C, and it's using a /30. So don't forget to ensure you use the right subnet mask. I'm going to proceed and just go do the reservation as we were told to do so. So exit, and I'm going to do IP DHCP excluded address 203.0.113.1. I have reserved my IP address. In a bit not to confuse myself, I'm going to go back and make that correction quickly. So we'll be going back to make that change real quick. So it's going to be IP DHCP pool. So this is how you see the one I'm going back. You have to make sure you are on the right pool to make the change. IP DHCP. We wrote DCHP. So DHCP pool A, and I'm going to go make that change. Default router. 192.168.1.1. Okay, let me explain to you why I'm choosing 1.1. This is like a crisscross. If you look carefully, router 1 is pointing to router 2 as its default router. Router 2 is pointing to router 1 as its default router. Then we can now configure the DHCP helper. We're actually doing this. Our configuration is like this because we are configuring the DHCP helper. DHCP helper. The DHCP helper is actually used to configure DHCP on a routed interface. When you have routing in place on a routed interface. But don't worry about this. You're not going to face this in your exam. I just wanted to add it to the puzzle for additional configuration and additional knowledge. That way we have an understanding that this is also possible. But you're not going to see this in the exam, or you're going to meet it in your curriculum as per the CCNA level. Alright. So we have made the correction and we have pointed router 2 in the right direction to use the internal network, which is 1.1 on router 1 as its default router. Now I'm going to hit enter. Now that we have made that correction, I'm going to go to the next router, which is router 2, and I'm also going to do configuration for router 2. We're going to come back here, so I'll go to my terminal and go into my router. I'll go to my global configuration mode. I'm going to ensure I configure router 1. So if you look at the configuration for router 1, it said that's question 2. Configure router 1 G00 interface as the DHCP helper, as the DHCP client. What IP address did you configure? What IP address did you configure? What IP address did you configure? What IP did you configure? So we'll go to the G00 interface. So interface G00 on router 2. Sorry about that. So interface G00 on router 2. I'm going to do no shot to wake up the interface. And we'll assign the IP address assigned to that interface. It's a /30, don't forget. So IP address 203.0.113.2. 255.255.255.252. That's the IP we assigned for that G00 interface on router 1 because it's a /30. Don't forget, that's 2 hosts. If you take out the block size, which is 256 from 252, you get a block size of 4. And when you remove the number of hosts using the subnet formula, you'll be left with two valid hosts, which is what we are using, 1 and 2, because 0 starts up every network. So under subnet 0, the valid hosts are 1 and 2. 3 is our broadcast and 4 is the next valid subnet. So we were given 1 on our neighbor router, which is router 2. The interface, the IP address for the remote router, which in our router 1, must and can only be 2, which is what we just configured. And I'm going to hit enter. Question number 3. Configure router 1 as a DHCP relay agent for the 192.168.1.0 subnet. We are still on router 1, so I'm going to go into the interface of router 1, exit. I'm going to go into the interface of router 1, which is G0 of 1. I'm going to configure it as using the IP DHCP helper command. IP helper, IP helper, IP helper address. Let's see. Yep, it's still coming out. The IP helper address is going to be the interface of the on the router where the actual DHCP was configured. That's the internal interface. For this lab, the internal interface seems to be what .1. So I'm going to point it back from this router to this .1. Okay, don't forget when we are configuring router 2, we pointed router 2 to 1. So now we have to point it back in the opposite, in that direction. Okay, we have to point it back in that direction. I said it's like a crisscross, So it's gonna be 192.168.2.1. That's gonna be our DHCP helper, and I'm gonna hit enter. And your command is as easy as possible, and that is it. So let's save our configuration just to be sure. I'm gonna save my configuration, copy run start on router 1. Router 1. I'm going to save my configuration. So the last step said using the CLI of PC1 and PC2, make them request IP address from the DHCP server. How do we make them request? So I'll go to the desktop, I'll go to the command prompt, which is our own CLI. I'm going to use the command ipconfig / let's do the renew and see what happens. Renew. Let's see what happens. See, I did not configure any DHCP on router 1, but see, router 1 just got an IP address. You can see router 1 got an IP address from our DHCP server, and all of this DHCP configuration was done on router 2. But because router 1 is the DHCP client, it was able to receive the IP address configured. See, so receiving an IP, and you also got a gateway and the DNS. If you observe carefully, it started from 1.11 by skipping 1 towards 10 as described on our lab and on our configuration. Thank you.